What if the you who wakes each morning is only the last dream to form, an echo rising from a silence older than your name? Each night reveals the truth you refuse to see, identity dissolves, but awareness remains, watching from behind the curtain. And if the self can vanish so easily, what else in your life is only pretending to be real? Stay, your awareness is already shifting. A faint internal dimming begins each night as the edges of your awareness soften, like a fracture in the surface of your certainty widening without permission. You feel the familiar slide where thoughts lose their shape, but you never choose the moment the last coherent line dissolves. In that blur, the story of you thins until even the narrator vanishes. What does it mean that the self disappears before you can even ask where it went? A subtle tightening forms when you notice how the mind releases its grip on identity the way fingers loosen a rope they didn't know they were holding. The micro-glance you give the dark before surrendering holds the echo of a fear you never fully face. Yet the fall into sleep arrives without negotiation, as if some deeper intelligence overrides your protest. Who is the one collapsing when the one who resists dissolves? A quiet pressure builds in the space between your last waking breath and the first descent into nothing, a gap so brief you rarely feel it. Here, the scaffolding of roles, ambitions, and wounds drops away like a costume falling to the floor. The silence that receives you doesn't ask for your history or your name. If the self is so easily shed, what anchor was it ever clinging to? A thin internal shimmer appears when your mind realizes it cannot follow itself into the dark. The observer who watches your days cannot cross this threshold. No witness enters that depth, no storyteller survives the fall, no inner commentator continues the monologue. Awareness slips into a space where even the idea of awareness is absent. Who returns in the morning if no one remained through the night? A low echo lingers each time you awaken, a residue of the place you vanished into, though you rarely pause to sense it. You reassemble without remembering the dissolution, stepping back into a self you didn't rebuild consciously. The nightly disappearance goes unquestioned, though it is the most radical thing you do. What part of you watches this cycle repeat, and why does it accept the vanishing so quietly? A subtle flicker inside you appears when you notice how easily the mind lets go of its own biography the moment sleep pulls it under. Your roles, your fears, your opinions fall away like dust shaken from cloth. Nothing inside protests the disappearance, not even the voice that calls itself I. If identity evaporates without a struggle each night, what was it ever protecting? A soft internal dissonance forms as you recognize how the ego pretends to be essential while proving itself optional every time consciousness dims. That familiar tension in the chest, your signature worry, doesn't follow you into sleep. The echo of your ambitions, the stories you defend, the wounds you rehearse, all vanish without ceremony. Who are you when even your suffering forgets itself? A quiet ripple moves through your awareness when you admit that the one who insists on being someone simply isn't present half the time. The micro-twitch of self-importance, the instinct to justify, the urge to explain, none survive the plunge into unconsciousness. The ego behaves like a mask that believes it is a face. If the mask falls off nightly, where is the true face hiding? A deeper shiver rises when you consider that no fear accompanies the disappearance, because the structure that fears is gone as well. The one who worries about losing identity cannot enter the place where identity dissolves. Each night proves you don't need to be you to continue existing. If existence doesn't require your story, why does your story feel so heavy? A final inner tremor appears as you sense how effortless the return is. Identity reattaches itself as lightly as breath forming on cold glass. You awaken into a name, a memory, a personality, as if stepping into clothes laid out overnight. If the self can be removed and restored without your involvement, who is the one choosing to wear it now? Pause, notice what identity feels like in this moment, and ask why it arrived so quickly. A thin internal tremor rises when you notice the observer you trust, the one you think is always watching, never follows you into sleep. That steady voice claiming to be the witness fades before the first dream forms. Even the sense of "I am here" dissolves like mist in a deeper silence. If the observer vanishes, who was observing in the first place? A quiet fracture opens as you realize the supposed constant presence inside you is actually intermittent, flickering like a candle in shifting wind. In waking life it comments, judges, interprets microglances, and pauses as if it were the core self. Yet in sleep, not even a whisper of it remains. How can the center disappear if it was ever truly the center? A subtle ripple moves through your awareness when you see how often this inner witness claims authorship of moments it never created. The mind hesitates and the observer inserts a story. The body reacts and the observer retroactively claims intention. But in sleep, this narrator vanishes entirely. If the narrator is gone, what story is left to tell itself? A deeper echo builds as you watch how the observer reappears each morning with the same confidence, unaware it was extinguished hours earlier. It steps forward, interpreting the world as if continuity were never interrupted. This is the rupture you rarely acknowledge. The self that insists on permanence has never stayed for the whole night. What does a disappearing observer truly observe? A low internal hum thickens when you sense the deeper intelligence beneath the observer, the one that continues without commentary. Dreams form without a witness, deep sleep unfolds without an I. Something remains, yet nothing personal survives the descent. What is that impersonal luminosity waiting beneath the watcher? Pause and sense the space behind your own observer. Who is aware of the one who claims to be aware? A faint shimmer stirs when you notice how dreams assemble entire worlds without asking the ego for permission. Streets appear, faces shift, voices speak with timing too precise to feel accidental. Yet the you who claims authorship while awake is nowhere in sight. If creation continues without the creator you believe yourself to be, what exactly is doing the creating? A quiet tension unfolds as characters in dreams look at you with intention, reacting to emotions you never consciously chose. Their gestures, micropauses, and expressions emerge with uncanny coherence, as if written by an invisible hand. No ego orchestrates these scenes, yet they move with internal logic. How does a story sustain itself when the storyteller has vanished? A deeper ripple appears as landscapes morph seamlessly, doorways bending into oceans, shadows turning into memories you forgot you carried. The transitions feel authored, but the author is absent. Your waking identity cannot take credit for this architecture. If the dream builds itself from a mind without a self, what is the self doing when it calls itself the builder? A low internal hum grows when you recognize how dreams expose the illusion of control you cling to while awake. The body in the dream runs without effort. The thoughts arise without your choosing. The plot shifts without negotiation. The ego enters only after you wake, claiming ownership it never had. Why does the mind accept a narrator who arrives late to its own creation? A silent pivot sharpens inside you as you glimpse the possibility that waking life may operate in the same way. Patterns unfolding, reactions forming, choices arising from depths you never see. Dreams simply reveal the mechanics more clearly because the ego has stepped aside. If the world continues flawlessly without the self, what role does the self truly play? Notice the moment a thought forms before you claim it. Who placed it there, and who is the one arriving afterward to wear it? A muted internal collapse begins as you approach the threshold where even dreams cannot follow, a descent so absolute it leaves no images behind. The familiar textures of thought loosen like threads slipping from a loom, and the mind falls into a space without form. Nothing of you survives this depth, not memories, not roles, not the observer. What remains when everything personal is erased? A slow, dense quiet forms as the last remnants of identity dissolve into a darkness that doesn't feel like absence, but like untouched potential. There is no movement here, no narrative, no inner voice rehearsing its importance. Yet something unmistakable persists, an awareness without content, a presence without shape. How do you know you rested if nothing was there to witness rest? A subtle internal echo returns when you recall how you awakened saying, I slept well, though no self existed to experience wellness. This paradox exposes a hidden layer beneath ego, a foundational consciousness that registers without thinking. No imagery accompanied it, yet its imprint remains. Who received that imprint if the receiver was gone? A deeper hum thickens in the recognition that deep sleep is the only state where the mind stops fabricating reality entirely. No projections arise, no opinions form, no fears negotiate their survival. Yet here, in the absence of everything, consciousness persists like a steady ember under ash. If awareness survives without identity, what does that reveal about your true nature? A final quiet rupture emerges when you sense that this contentless awareness is the ground you return to every night, the place before becoming someone again. It is the canvas on which waking and dreaming paint their worlds, yet it stays untouched by their colors. If this formless presence is constant, why do you assume the painted self is the one that's real? Notice the faint residue of silence left in your awareness right now. What part of you remembers the place where no one existed? A soft thinning of certainty begins as you consider how effortlessly consciousness continues in the nights when your identity is nowhere to be found. The mind that insists on being essential disappears, yet awareness does not collapse with it. Something keeps glowing beneath the absence, like a lamp shining even after the shade is removed. If the light remains without the lamp's shape, what was the shape ever claiming? A quiet shift stirs when you recognize how the ego behaves like a tenant pretending to be the building, loud, insistent, always asserting ownership. But every night proves its tenancy is temporary, it moves out without a trace, and existence keeps unfolding without interruption. The body breathes, the heart steadies, the organism persists. Who maintains the house when the tenant is gone? A deeper tremor forms as you feel the discrepancy between what the ego claims and what actually happens. It boasts of directing life, choosing thoughts, steering emotions, yet it vanishes in sleep and returns only to narrate what has already occurred. It is a commentator walking into a game long after it started. How does the commentator convince you it's the player? A slow internal tightening appears when you sense how much of your life operates from this deeper intelligence, the one that heals wounds, adjusts breathing, balances emotions in the dark. None of this requires personal identity. None depends on the story you defend during the day. If life moves smoothly without your persona, what is your persona truly adding? A final echo rises as you realize the ego is not the source of consciousness but a temporary modulation of it, a pattern, a ripple, a brief wave in something wider. Each night reveals this by wiping the wave clean while the ocean remains. If the ocean is always present, why keep mistaking yourself for the ripple? When the next thought appears, watch how it arrives without your command. Who is the one noticing the arrival? If this is hitting close to home, take a second, like the video, subscribe, and stay with me. A delicate internal flicker emerges as you wake, sensing the moment before identity clicks back into place. For a breath, there is only raw awareness, no name, no past, no narrative waiting to resume. Then the mind begins stitching familiar contours around you, like light slowly outlining a room. If you didn't rebuild yourself, who started the assembly? A soft pressure gathers as memories return in fragments, attaching themselves with the precision of a ritual you never learned. Preferences reappear, fears regain their weight, and old emotional patterns slip back onto you like clothing left folded overnight. None of this is chosen, it unfolds automatically. What unseen force performs this quiet reactivation? A deeper tremor rises when you notice how the ego claims authorship of this reconstruction, arriving late yet insisting it orchestrated the whole process. It pretends to be the architect but awakens into a structure already standing, beliefs arranged, emotions primed, identity fully dressed. Why does the one who wakes believe it built the world it wakes into? A quiet hum thickens as you sense the deeper intelligence beneath the ego, the same force that heals the body and regulates breath without announcing itself. It restores your personality with equal silence, assembling your inner landscape from the ground of awareness. Identity is not created by effort but inherited each morning. If you are inheriting a self, who is doing the receiving? A final internal pivot appears when you consider that each morning's reconstruction is a rehearsal of forgetting the blankness you came from, forgetting the ease with which identity dissolves, forgetting you are not the one doing the returning. And in this forgetting, the ego finds its throne again. What changes when you stop mistaking the throne for the ruler? Pause for one breath and watch how you returns. Who placed the next thought before you could claim it? A subtle distortion rises as you watch waking reality rebuild itself around you with the same fluidity dreams once had. People appear, routines activate, meaning snaps into place as if a script resumed mid-scene. Yet the mechanism feels eerily familiar, worlds forming without your command, reactions unfolding before intention. If waking feels so dreamlike, what makes you believe this version is more real? A quiet tension forms when you notice how the ego steps forward to claim ownership of movements already in motion. A thought appears, and the ego declares, "I decided that." A feeling surges, and it insists, "I caused that." But the timing is off. The claim always arrives after the event. Why trust the narrator who keeps missing the beginning of every sentence? A deeper hum spreads through your awareness as you observe how waking life, like dreams, operates through unseen patterns and impulses rising from depths you never touch. Micro-reactions, glances, hesitations, none are truly authored by the persona that pretends to direct them. If the dreamer inside the dream is not in control there, why assume the waking self is in control here? A quiet fracture opens as you sense how the ego stitches continuity out of disconnected moments, inventing a storyline to mask the same underlying spontaneity that drives your dreams. The world feels solid only because the ego keeps reinforcing it with explanations, interpretations, and claims of agency. What dissolves when you stop believing the interpreter is the source? A final pivot sharpens as you realize waking life may simply be a more stable dream, one with rules, edges, repetition, and a persistent sense of identity layered over a deeper, impersonal consciousness. The only difference is that the ego refuses to step aside long enough for you to see it. What happens when you stop taking the dream at face value? Notice the brief gap before a thought forms, the silent space where nothing is yet happening. Who or what is shaping the next frame of your waking dream? A deep ancestral echo stirs when you notice how your nightly disappearance mirrors the oldest teachings whispered across civilizations. The Upanishads spoke of the self behind the self, Zen pointed to the space before thought, Sufis sang of the one awareness wearing many faces. Each tradition circled the same doorway you cross unconsciously every night. If so many paths point to the same silence, what is that silence made of? A quiet inner tightening appears as you sense how these teachings never praised the ego you defend so fiercely. They revered the awareness beneath it, the witness of waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. This witness doesn't age, doesn't fracture, doesn't vanish when identity does. How does something so constant hide in the background of your own mind? A deeper resonance rises when you recall how sages described a fourth state, beyond all three you know, Turiya, the stillness threading through every moment of your existence. It is not a state you enter but the one noticing all states pass. Even your vanishing in sleep happens within it. If Turiya is always present, why does the mind pretend it is absent? A slow shimmering insight forms as you realize ancient mystics weren't offering metaphors. They were describing the architecture of your own consciousness. They saw the persona as a temporary mask, the dream self as another mask, and the deep sleep blankness as a return to source. What part of you recognizes their words as something you already knew? A final internal vibration emerges as you feel these teachings converge on a single truth. The consciousness you take for granted is not personal but universal, uninterrupted by the rise and fall of your identity. You are not the wave but the ocean noticing its waves come and go. If this is what ancient wisdom points to, what stops you from seeing it directly? Listen to the faint pull behind your thoughts. What ancient voice is speaking through your own awareness right now? A subtle loosening begins when you realize your entire identity rises and falls each day like a ripple briefly appearing on a vast surface. What you call my life is a pattern sustained only while waking, an arrangement of memories, reactions, and roles that dissolves the moment sleep takes you. If the ripple disappears nightly without consequence, what is the water beneath trying to show you? A quiet recalibration unfolds as the mind recognizes it has been gripping a costume, not a core. You perform a self, defend a self, fear for a self, and yet this self is absent half of your existence. The deeper consciousness beneath it never wavers, never bruises, never disappears. Why invest so fully in a character that dissolves at dusk? A deeper shift emerges when you watch how outcomes lose their sharp teeth once you see they belong to the dream of waking life, not to the awareness holding it. Success, failure, reputation, conflict, all feel lighter when you know they are temporary phenomena passing through something far more stable. If nothing in the story lasts, why cling as if permanence were promised? A soft but piercing clarity forms as you sense the possibility of living as the witness rather than the persona, acting fully, feeling deeply, engaging completely, yet without the heaviness of identification. Life becomes play instead of performance, creation instead of defense. What happens when you stop being the actor and start noticing the stage? A final inner opening widens as you recognize the ego is simply the outfit consciousness wears to move through the day, and sleep is the nightly return to your true nature, formless, unburdened, untouched. This makes waking life not less meaningful, but more spacious, more intentional, more free. If you are the awareness behind all appearances, what kind of life becomes possible now? There is a quiet moment, right before thought returns, when you can feel how thin the boundary is between the self you defend and the awareness that holds everything. Life becomes lighter when you stop gripping the character and start sensing the consciousness underneath, fluid, steady, untouched by the rise and fall of your story. Let yourself act fully, but without carrying the weight of being someone who must control every outcome, and notice how the world softens around that shift. What begins to change when you stop mistaking the temporary for the true? Move through your days with the same clarity you meet in the silence of sleep, aware, grounded, unattached. Let the subtle question stay with you. Who is noticing this moment? Who steps forward each morning? Who lets go each night? If this awareness is what you are, what becomes possible when you live from it? Stay close to that edge, return to it often, and follow the pull toward deeper seeing. Comment, awaken. You've remembered.